One of the things that I noticed in the reading this morning when it said that St. Paul said ambassadors of Christ, we really have that opportunity in the business world to be ambassadors of Christ in a lot of ways, in a way more influential way than a lot of people do. So we need to make sure we take advantage of that opportunity. I'm going to take just a second to give a little bit about me. Not that I want to talk about me, but I want to talk about my upbringing and my background. And I was born and raised in rural South Dakota, as Mark said. Any of you who've ever been to Hoven, South Dakota know that we got the big cathedral, the prairies. When I was there, it was 99.9% Catholic. So I don't think I met a non-Catholic till I was probably halfway through high school, maybe the end. I really hadn't. I knew nothing but the Catholic faith. And we were very fortunate, and I look at my childhood and how many ways I was blessed from having great parents and grandparents, and I look at that living in this all-Catholic community, though it seems kind of segregated, it gives you a base that you never lose in your life. And I had my parents were both teachers. My mom was probably one of the last one-room schoolhouse teachers. She passed away in 1972 of breast cancer, but up to 6 months before that, she was still teaching in a one-room schoolhouse. I always kind of say a one-room schoolhouse is kind of like the precursor to what we now, with all the homeschools that we have today. But there was like 3 families in that area that wanted to stay in the one-room schoolhouse, and so she continued that. My dad was a teacher of VOAG, and so many times he always said, he lived a humble life, not a lot that he had, but what he did was what he gave to the students that he taught, and it's even today. Just last week when I was down in Florida, I met a schoolmate of mine, and he was talking about the influence my dad had on his life, so he had many opportunities to influence the young. One of the things that was really cool for me was Catholic education. I was grade 1 through 8 in a Catholic school, but to be very honest, in Hoven, even the nuns even taught in the high school. So it was almost like having 12 years of Catholic school or of Catholic education, even though it was by theory a public high school. And I believe so much in the Catholic education and the Catholic school systems. We made an offer to our kids that every grandchild, of which there are 20, that wants to go to the Catholic school system, we pay the tuition. And I made that offer quite a few years ago and didn't realize how expensive it was going to be. I might have lost my house payment, but I gained a payment that was more than equivalent to the house payment. But it's worth every bit of it. It's so enjoyable to go to their programs and hear them talk about Jesus and doing it out in the open, where in the public schools it's being suppressed so much. So it's really an awesome thing. And the other day I was reading something about Catholic schools and the Catholic Church as a whole and how many people we educate in this country. It's absolutely amazing. As a church, we should be very proud. I didn't know what I wanted to be, but I knew I didn't want to be a teacher. Maybe that was because my parents were both teachers. And when I left, I knew I was going to go to college. My dad went to South Dakota State University, so I thought, I got to go to South Dakota State University. That was just the way it had to be. So I went there, and I decided I want to be a physical therapist. Unfortunately, the first 2 years I had way too much fun to get good enough grades to get into physical therapy school, and we didn't have a program within the state that allowed us to stay. We had to go out. When I didn't get accepted into that, again, I'm such a believer that God guides us, and He guides every one of us in a direction. We may think this is a mysterious thing that happens in our life, but He knows exactly what He wants for us. So I ended up meeting a guy who happened to be the head of the MBA program at USD. And we got talking, and I thought, gee, if I can't be a physical therapist, I'll be a hospital administrator, something in the health industry. So I went to the MBA program, got through, and applied for hospital administrators, clinic administrators all over the place, and nothing came. I had 3 kids at the time and a 4th on the way, so I needed a job pretty bad. So one of my teachers, I think all of us have got a teacher we remember that was important in their life, made an effect in their life. Dr. Bob Johnson at USD was that teacher for me. He cared so much about everything in my life. He was trying to help me get a job, and he comes up to me and says, I know this is something you're probably not interested in, but there's a small manufacturing firm over in Alcester, South Dakota that's looking for somebody to kind of help the president out. And I said, hey, I'll do anything, you know. And so went over on a Saturday, started working on a Monday. 3 days after I started that job, at a pay lesser than I thought I wanted to get with an MBA, but I took it, I got offered a job to manage a clinic in Yankton at the pay I wanted. But my upbringing had taught me, you make a commitment, you stick with the commitment. And I said, I'm going to stick there. Again, God has the guy that was guiding that whole decision. And I found out I loved manufacturing. I was very blessed to help that small company grow fivefold in the first 5 years. And then if many of you remember the late 70s, early 80s, when double-digit inflation, interest rates approaching 20%, it was a tough time to be in business. And the business I worked for was in the same situation. They decided to bring in a general manager. Well, the first day he comes in and we butt heads, I'm going like, well, one of us isn't going to be here too much longer. And it so happened it was me. And a few months later, I got fired. Very traumatic situation. But the plus side again, God's there working with me, is that I had this plan to start a business, me and another individual. We didn't know what it was going to be. We were talking solar panels. We were talking everything under the sun. We just wanted to have our own business. Well, here I was thrown into a situation where I had a job offer in Boston, but I'm a South Dakota boy. I love it here. So I'm going like, I got to give this thing a try. So there are two of us, and actually ended up bringing a third partner in, started our company in 1981. One of the guys retired in 89, and another one in 98, and in 98 I became sole owner of the company. But all that time, it's easy when you're 66 to look back and say, boy, it's easy to trace what happened, and you questioned it at the time, but now you know God had a direction in what you were doing. And that part is to me, I guess it's the mystery that we all believe why we're here this morning is because of Jesus and what he does for us. What I found out, in business is that it's people you meet that make the difference, and most of you know that. And it's the people that sell your product. It's the people that supply you stuff. It's the more than anything, the employees that work for you. Well, I happened to meet a gentleman called John Beckett. John made oil burners, and in my pressure washers, he was the guy who supplied me the burners. We happened to be the first company to use Beckett burners on our pressure washers, and John knew we were young, we were just getting started. He gave us terms. He was a really important part of why we were able to survive. And again, as you look at that, he put me in this place, and think about that. We're about, I think 1995, 95. I'm going to show you a clip of a broadcast that came on ABC News in 1995 that literally changed my belief about integrating business and religion. So I'm going to show that to you, and then I'll discuss it.
We begin another season of The American Agenda, and we start this September with our religion correspondent, Peggy Waymeyer. It seems to us that everywhere you turn in America these days, millions of people are searching for greater meaning in their life. Tonight, we're going to concentrate on the growing tendency of business leaders in America to have their personal faith make an impact in their companies. In other words, they are using the Bible as a guide to business.
Nancy Borer, an assembly line worker, is taking a 6-month maternity leave with partial pay. On top of that, her employer made the extraordinary offer of 3 years off so she can raise her children. Eric Hess assembled oil burners until his employer sent him to school and paid his $1,500 tuition. Now he's a plant supervisor. The man who gave these unusual opportunities to Nancy and Eric is John Beckett, a successful Ohio manufacturer who takes his work and his faith very seriously.
My main mission in life is to know the will of God and to do it.
So Beckett prays for God's guidance on everything from maternity benefits and salaries to new business ventures.
I see my role in the work world being to take what I believe as a Christian and translate that into practical day-to-day expressions of what I believe.
Beckett doesn't expect his employees to adopt his beliefs, but whether they're Christians or not, he says he sees them all as part of God's plan.
Every individual is created in the image and likeness of God.
To Beckett, that means every employee deserves generous retirement benefits, a fitness center, even lunch hour basketball. And because Beckett's faith teaches him that family comes before work, he makes sure his employees don't put in too many hours at the office.
I've been able to have significant accomplishment in the workplace without sacrificing my home.
Laura Nash, a professor of business ethics at Boston University, has researched business leaders who mix faith and profit-making. At first, she was skeptical.
We get very suspicious that this is all just one big hypocrisy. It's hard to believe that religion can be part of someone's business life.
What Nash found was that literally thousands of business leaders across the nation are struggling to integrate their very private world of faith into the competitive world of work.
I think it is a reaction to an ethic of greed that kind of took hold of business in the 80s. Now you see a sense of emptiness that, gee, maybe there's a little more to life than just my bank account.
All right, let's pray together.
The 90s quest for meaning has created networks of spiritual support groups for business leaders.
And we're talking about how we can be more effective leaders in the marketplace.
From Southern business professionals who gather in the hundreds during lunch hour looking for spiritual food.
You want to know how to run your business? Get a Bible and read the book of Proverbs.
To Orthodox Jews on Wall Street who break away from the office to study the Talmud, the books on Jewish law.
And the bracha came out, you will have it.
There are 15,000 members of the Christian Businessmen's Committee. They meet in small groups at sunup to pray for help on everything from employee problems to marketing strategies.
We're going to spend some time talking about the issue of temptation.
Then there's the Fellowship of Companies for Christ, for hundreds of chief executive officers who struggle with the burdens of leadership.
I need to change my priorities.
They want support, they want wisdom, they want help in finding answers to very difficult business problems.
John Beckett faced such a problem. He was offered a lucrative contract on the condition that he pay a kickback. He turned it down.
Profitability is not the bottom line. The bottom line is doing what's right. It's doing what's honorable.
Beckett's faith may cost him some business, but it also may be the reason why he's the nation's largest manufacturer of oil burners.
Are you getting a good finish on that?
He says his faith compels him to price products fairly and build trust among customers and employees. But Beckett and others say the lasting rewards cannot be measured in dollars. They say their satisfaction comes from building a business without selling their souls.
Thank you, God. Thank you.
This is Peggy Waymeyer for the American Agenda.
You know, when I first saw that, what stuck out to me most was here was a guy in front of the whole nation saying, we're all made in the image and likeness of God. And that really hit me. And I said, wow, here's a guy saying this. He's in business. And I knew him personally, not really well at that time. But it really hit me, and I said, I can do better than what I'm doing. I always felt that emptiness. So how can I go to church every Sunday, but then I go and I try to treat people fairly and all, but it's like almost you want to be totally silent during the week. You're almost feeling like, well, you don't want to bring anything up with a dealer. You don't want to bring anything up with an employee. You don't want to bring anything up because it might offend them. And at that point in my life, I decided I had to change. And then things started falling in place. After John did this, first thing I did was call up and say, can I have this back in the VCR days, can I have a VCR of that presentation? Which, yeah, they sent me a VCR the next day, and I started watching it over and over, and I'd show it to my employees in different ways to try and say, what can we do, what can we do? Well, we had a distributor meeting coming up in April of that following year. And I called John and said, John, would you be interested in talking at our group about integrating faith in your business? And boy, I tell you, that was out of the box, big time for me. And I'm going like, here I am. I'm going to open it up to the people that sell my product all over the country. I'm going to open it up to my suppliers that are going to be there. I'm going to open it up to everybody. And that was a big thing for me. I was nervous, scared, and it turned out John came in and he spent a half hour is all in a talk, and he was the hit of the show. And people kept talking about it and talking about it. What I realized is there's that pent up inside that a lot of people have that feeling. And all they need to do is open the door a little bit that says you're willing to talk about Christ and you're willing to talk about the effect he has on your life and on your business, and boom, they open up and start talking. So it wasn't long after that, when after John was there, that he called me and said, I've been working on a book. He said, and I got a manuscript for you to read and to tell me what you think of it. And so he sent it to me. At the time, he didn't have a title for it. He called it Business Salt on his manuscript. And it was a 3-hour read. In the book, he says 2 90-minute flights, and that's what it is, called Loving Monday. It was published first in 1998. This is a version published in 2006, an expanded version of it. And I was fortunate enough to actually, in the back of this book, in the afterword, to write my story a little bit and about the effect the book had on my life. But when I read it that night, and I read it all in one night, it just like opened everything up. John's way, the way he talks in this book, how you can take the secular part of your business and match it with the spiritual part of your business, and it's all God's work anyway, so why separate it? And it all works to the betterment of God and the betterment of our faith, and in turn, the betterment of your relationships with your customers, your employees, and your suppliers. So it really made a huge difference to me that night. And so since on our 25th, I had John come and speak again. But I said to myself, what can I do to bring this into my business? What can I do to show this kind of a commitment that my employees understand where my heart is? And that's when I went out and I found to myself that this roadmap, which Loving Monday is, if you read this book, it's a roadmap of how to do it in your business. And it was written in 1998. It's just as pertinent today as it was then, if not more. I reread the book at least once or twice a year just to keep myself up and working on it. But I looked at ways to do it, and I said to myself, how can we do it? And so one of the things he talks about in here is core values of integrity, excellence, and a profound respect for the individual. And so I called John and said, can I use those same core values? Is that okay? And he said, absolutely. He said, you can use them. So I sit there and we formed what we called a values committee. And we brought the committee together and said, how can we take these 3 core values and make them part of our business life every day? And we at our quarterly meetings, they would get up and give a report of the things they've done. We have signs around the plant that talk about that. We have lots of things that try to integrate these values every day into our business. We did that. I established a mission statement that actually reflected our Christian values instead of a secular type statement. I was very open in the fact that all these values reflect the Christian beliefs of our Latin family. And I also established what we called a sharing program. One of the things that's really interesting, and as business people, we get many opportunities to share the wealth, so to speak, that God has gifted us with. And what I found out is that, as with your kids, you teach them by example. So how do we teach our employees the joy of giving? And that's really what it come down to. So we went and formed a committee, and this committee meets every quarter. We give a percentage of our profits to that committee each quarter to turn around and give to wherever they want to give, not to where I want to give, but to wherever they want to give. It's really interesting. The first year I did that, at the end of the year, I talked with the group, and I said, what'd you guys think of this? And the one guy said, in all my life, I've never given charity one dime. And he said, it's really fun, being able to know you have some effect. And he said, since then, I've started to give at church every Sunday. So it's example, just like we do with our kids, we have that opportunity with employees the same exact way. And that has turned into a good program for us. We've set up a program for adoption. If somebody adopts, we financially help them as a respect for life. As Catholics, that's one of our really core beliefs, is a respect for life, and we do that. I have not done what John did with the paid time off for maternity leave yet, but we've still been thinking about that. One thing I find with this is it's totally fluid. It never ends. You're always coming up with new and better ways to communicate this with your people. I've got a kind of a neat story of how employees can affect you as an owner. This girl's name was Deb Gates. She's very young, or she was very young. She was probably 30, maybe 28 or so when this happened to her, and she got ovarian cancer. And I remember going in the hospital and praying with her, and we prayed for God's help in her condition. She wasn't Catholic, but it doesn't matter. She had a faith, and she believed in God. And we prayed, and I made a commitment to her 18 years ago now that I'd say the rosary every day. I still do because of that employee. I wouldn't probably do it as faithful, but I made the commitment to her. She lasted 8 years after that. She passed away, and been 10 years since. And I think about her every day when I say that rosary. But last week had a really cool thing that ties in with that. Her mom works for us, and she's been working for us for many, many years. And she's 68 years old. And I heard through the grapevine that she was thinking of retiring. So she was out back, and I said, hey, Peg, I heard that you were thinking of retiring. She said, I thought about it. But she said, Deb loved this business so much, she said. And every time that I come to work, I think of her. And she said, I'm not ready to retire yet. So, and she's a great worker, so she can work as long as she wants as far as I'm concerned, But that kind of a situation is something that comes through, again, a closeness and a sharing that you have when you integrate faith into your business. We started a program we call Lunch with the President. And I just turned the president reins over to my son a few months ago. So I'm not technically the president anymore, just the CEO and chair. But I still go to this lunch, but we do this, everybody whose birthday's that month goes to lunch. And it's really interesting because before we start the meal, we pray. And it started to become, everybody knows that. Everybody knows they won't touch their food till I say a prayer. And as Catholics, we're not really good at the ad-lib prayers. We say, bless us, O Lord, and that's where we are, But ad-libbing was hard for me, and it's still uncomfortable for me to do that in front of a group, is to say, but we do that each time and talk, and each one varies a little bit. But if I miss it, I guarantee you they will bring it to my attention that I haven't said it, and I say it. So it's another part of that. I'm going to have Mark hand out these these are not really, what they are is expansion of those integrity, excellence, and a profound respect for an individual. I don't know if any of you belong to Vistage groups at all. Anybody here do Vistage? Vistage is a CEO help group that I happened to go one down in Omaha. And we had a speaker talk about culture and what it can do, and we work continually to try to improve the culture in our business. And what he showed, he had a handout of fundamentals that we can use to improve the culture of our business. And in this case, what I did was took our core values of integrity, excellence, and a profound respect for the individual and added to them fundamentals under each one. We take 15 minutes every week, first day of every week, everybody in the plant gets together in groups of 8 to 10 people, and they talk about what our fundamental for that week is. If it's the first one is do what is best for your customer. And then they discuss what is best for the customer, how can we best treat our customer, and so forth. And we do this, and we go through all 27. When we're done, we start right back up with one and go again. We usually adjust our groups so different people get to talk and share their ideas with different people. But we've done this now for about 4 years. We've gone through the fundamentals almost, would be seven times, I think, right now. But the purpose of over and over to get in their minds the values we have in our company and how we're going to keep them going for the future. So I just hand that out if you have something that you have an idea on or something. It's a nice way to get that communication, and it's a nice way to express and continue to push our values on. Basically, to kind of end it up, I truly believe that God is number one, family is number two, and work is number three. And I emphasize that to every one of my people. We don't allow Sunday work under any circumstances. Very seldom do we do Saturday work. Certainly when you're in the sales part of it, you're at shows and stuff like that happens, but we don't do it in our plant because I truly believe people need time off in order to have and not to push too many hours on people whenever possible. So God, family, work, very important to us. But I want to, before I take any questions, I want to end with something I read from Pope Francis. He says, "The world tells us to seek success, power, and money. And God tells us to seek humility, service, and love." Thank you very much.